Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member from Mitcham and Morden for securing this important and timely debate. And I think it is debates like this, actually, that expose our politics and the difference between the political parties. It's vital that we not only discuss pay ratios, but solutions to extortionate pay, such as an excessive pay levy, and improved collective bargaining for workers through strong trade unions as a way to uplift the pay of thousands, millions actually, of workers. It's also crucial that we are able to place the extraordinary, extortionate high pay of FTSE 100 chief executives in the context of the crisis of low pay and the crisis of work altogether in this country, where millions upon millions of people are struggling to make ends meet, where work is certainly no longer the preventer of poverty, because that is the reality for millions of people out there. Despite this state of affairs, as has already been mentioned, by lunchtime on the 4th of January, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that the top chief executives in the UK had been paid more than their average employees would over the course of the entire year. What an extraordinary fact that is. And every single year, that date gets shorter and shorter and shorter. At some point, I'm sure, unless action is taken, it'll be 1 minute past midnight that those people will have been paid much more than their employees. And every year of this government, there is no action on that extraordinary fact. Those at the top are increasing their wealth. And I agree with the member, maybe this place should relax a little bit, because I think fat cat is the exact right title for those executives, now getting 133 times more than the average worker. That means that the salary of the average FTSE chief executive is the same as that of 386 workers on the minimum wage. And I think it's it's politically poignant at this point to notice that there are just some people that aren't that outraged at that statistic, that they're quite comfortable with inordinate and huge salaries of executives, with people being paid gross more than those who work for them. And I'm sure that nobody would argue, and it was touched on by the Honourable Member, that a FTSE 100 chief executive works 133 times harder than the hospital porter or a cleaner or a caterer that I went on a solidarity protest, if you like, yesterday with those who are striking at the Ministry of Justice and at the Department for Energy, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Just let's think about that caterer just for 1 second, who is on exactly £8 per hour, is fighting for the London living wage. That works out for a 40-hour week, every single week for a month, about £1,280 that person will get. If you think of rent, if you think of transport, if you think of bills and food, it is a tiny amount that that person has to live on every single month. If we think about, the teacher or the nurse in our NHS, or somehow that they have the combined worth of 386 workers, I will, yeah.
I appreciate the member giving way. She's making an incredibly powerful point. Does it annoy her as much as it annoys me that the Tories talk about hard-working families, and when they talk about hard-working families, they don't mean hospital porters? They mean people who are much higher up the tree than that, when actually hospital porters and cleaners and chefs, people that she's talking about, are working incredibly hard every day just to make £8 an hour.
And that work should be valued. It is no coincidence that those people are working really, really hard, still can't actually survive very often, don't have enough money to pay the bill, are getting into debt for everyday items, not for luxury holidays, not for not for luxuries at all. And actually, those people should be at the very heart of our concerns in this place. But I'm always mindful, actually, never to use the word earn when we're talking about the pay of the very few at the top. What possibly could you do to earn that amount of money? I think it's also I believe it's crucial to recognise this in the context of which the FTSE 100 pay is widening. In stark contrast to this stockpiling of the wealth by a few, years of austerity and wage stagnation means that millions of workers across the country, as I've already said, are struggling to make ends meet. In-work poverty is rising, household debt is at its highest rate, many people are relying on borrowing, and 1 in 5 workers, more than 5 million people, are paid less than the living wage, a huge increase from 3.4 million people in 2009. Insecure work has without a doubt become the norm, with nearly 4 million people, 1 in 9 workers, facing uncertainty and worry, and they are trapped. And to illustrate how this is a low pay trap, 1 in 4 employees earning the minimum wage for 5 years have been unable to move out of that low pay. Some people are doing 2-3 jobs just to try and pay the bills. And it's not always been like this. In 1980, as was mentioned, the median pay of directors in FTSE 100 companies was 63,000, with the median pay across the country 5,400. The ratio of executive pay to the average wage then, less than 40 years ago, was 11:1. But in 2002, the pay of the FTSE 1 CEO had shot up 79 times to that of their average employee. And last year, it had reached 150 times. So nothing that this place is doing is stopping that runaway train of inequality. And I would seriously hope that in anyone's minds, these ratios are unacceptable and completely unjustifiable. But it's particularly obscene that this escalation has come at a time when millions of people are struggling. The stark contrast between those two sets of people, if you like. And I've no doubt that the Minister will refer to the government's reforms to, tackle excessive pay in her speech shortly. But I want to make it absolutely clear that under this government, pay inequality has not only continued to rise, but has increased the speed in which it is rising. And I'm proud that this side are committed to taking action, because in my mind, doing nothing is not good enough. And I think some people think, and I've definitely heard it loads of times when I've been out campaigning, people say things like, oh, well, the rich just continue to get rich and the poor get poorer. There's nothing we can do about it. I fundamentally disagree with that. Yes, the rich are getting richer, but there is definitely something that we can do about it. In contrast to the Tories, a Labour government would ensure pay ratios of no more than 20:1 in the public sector, for example, and introduce an excessive pay levy, which will charge companies a 2.5% levy on earnings above £330,000 per year. I mean, that is a huge amount, and 5% on those above 500,000. It's estimated that just that alone would raise 1.3 billion a year. And I'm sure the Minister will mention that from the 1st of July, this government will make sure that companies with more than 250 employees will be obliged to reveal and justify their pay ratios. But there is no obligation at all on these companies to take any meaningful action beyond the act of publicising those facts. It's yet more empty rhetoric. How is it helpful to just have the injustice out there without any action to remedy it? We need practical political solutions to curb undeserved excessive pay, as well as to create mechanisms for better income distribution. That's why we commissioned a report by Prem Seeker published last year, suggesting a range of measures that would apply to the 7,000 plus companies in the UK that have more than 250 employees, accounting for more than 10 million workers. Needless to say, we're looking at this report's recommendations very closely, such as proposals requiring executive remuneration packages of all large companies to be subject to a binding vote. But this is just one solution to excessive executive pay. Trade unions are the collective voice of workers, and they have to be central to this debate. They are a huge player in reducing inequality in the workplace. But after years of anti-union policies, the vast majority of workers have absolutely no say over their pay, conditions or hours of work. Protections that existed before under collective bargaining agreements have been completely lost. And I think workers deserve a lot more. Pay ratios is just one aspect of tackling pay inequality. And that's why the Labour Party and government would set up a new department to roll out sectoral collective bargaining, protecting the interests of workers and strengthening trade unions, introducing new rights and freedoms so that every worker gets the support, security and pay at work that they deserve. It's surely time to end this excessive greed. People feasting on the backs of workers who are struggling to make ends meet, have that gut-wrenching feeling that they can't afford nappies for their children, yet they're working 40 plus hours a week. Surely that can't be right, and this government must act to end that injustice.